Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're staying warm. Everything's closed down in Houston. Icy roads, accidents. But silver lining, I had a lot of free time today where I could do a more extensive video than I normally do. Most of the time, whatever the length of my video is, that's the most time I spend on the video. As you know, I don't spend much on editing. I basically put some captions in, maybe some pictures, upload it within an hour afterward. So I appreciate you guys bearing with my primitive editing skills. But today I did do a little more editing, a little more effort, because what I wanted to do was follow up on the prior video where I talked about my regrets, but it was kind of clickbaitish in a way because it wasn't a regret in the piece that I bought, but it was an important point to showcase that the tools that we get with these reference subs are limited. And there were some nuances that I talked about there that I wanted to expound on in this video, as well as give you an example with measurements, with my system, real time at my listening position, to show you if you have certain tools, how drastic and material it can be in measurements, and then even audibly when you listen afterward. Because there are different standards in this hobby and different levels of experience. Most everybody agreed with me, and I appreciate all the comments. They were all very good comments from that last video. But one thing that is something to note is that just because you with one experience have experience with one external crossover and you weren't able to get it to work, that does not prove as refutement and a generalization that applies to everyone else. The point is, when you have more control and experience, and those tools are very high quality tools, that is the three things that are needed. You just can't have one without the other. And so today I'm going to expound more on the other thing, having the right tools, like in the digital domain, Dirac and the MiniDSP SHD, different controls, show you how powerful that is. And then also some of my experience that makes it the whole thing is what you need. Now, let's back up a bit. Can high level be fine? Subwoofers in general be fine and good? Yes. And I'll give you an example. I pulled out one of my little bookshelf speakers. Actually, this is a very good bookshelf speaker, by the way. But anyway, if you're just buying a sub to augment the bass of a low frequency limited main speaker, that is totally fine, and high level may be okay. I still think you're excuse me, you're better off alleviating these from even seeing that signal. But there's a different standard when you're just using subs to augment your limited mains, because you're going to be forced with low frequency limited mains to have a high enough crossover point to meet that. It doesn't give you the power that I'm talking about for optimal performance. For optimal performance in buying a sub, for what I'm talking about, you need to have almost full range floor standards. At least a 40 hertz, that can play at a high volume in whatever room you're at. Because what you don't want to have to do is be limited at what crossover slope you choose, because of the limitations of your mains. And that's what I'm going to showcase for you today with measurements in my listening room, is that I'm able to choose what wouldn't be the normal crossover slope. If you look at these speaker specs and the subwoofer, I'm showing you how that crossover change makes a huge difference. But I'm having the ability to do whatever crossover I want to address room issues at my listening position, peaks or nulls, versus having to fill in the blanks for limited mains. And even if you go to Magico, if you remember when we went to their state-of-the-art $900,000 floor standards, why did they still use subs in that room? It's not even that big. It's not because they needed more bass. What they needed is bass being launched from a different way. They're using DSP. Magico's using DSP, if you remember, to mate it to the mains, because you got to think of bass in your room. The best analogy I tell people is think of it as a wave pool. Well, the reason why a wave pool creates big waves, peaks and dips, just like sound does at your listening position, is because it's being launched from one direction and then the back wave, and then you get these peaks and nulls. It's a primitive way of how to analyze it. But if you can multiply where you're launching the bass, because most of the time where you put the floor standards, even if they're $900,000 Magico M9s, you're usually placing it where the mid-range and tweeters sound best. And that's rarely the same best place for bass. So by being able to place a subwoofer somewhere else where it's best to be launched, and quasi getting a swarm level, you know, JR does the swarm method where he puts 4 all around you. And then imagine that wave pool where now the impulses are coming from all around. Well, then the peaks and dips won't be as large in that wave pool because it's not creating one front wave and one back wave to create those peaks and dips. So that's why you would go with the swarm method, but not a lot of people have that ability. So in space and aesthetics and cost, wiring. So I'm showing you with 1 sub and 2, how you can still get state-of-the-art performance as long as you have the tools and the experience. Now, again, the quality of the tool matters, the experience matters. When you watch this, you may say, WTF, I don't want to get into all these weeds. I don't want to buy these kind of pieces. Well, help is on the way. Dirac does a lot of this stuff automated, as you'll see, but you still have to have the nuances to pick slopes and all that. ORC for the Bach is coming. Anybody that's bought the Bach in the past year from me is going to get that for free. And it's got in-ear measurements, which is even better than what I'm doing here with the Dirac. So there is help on the way for you guys, or you can hire somebody, because still there is an element of room stuff that has to be done and placement. And so hiring somebody like JR, if you want to do the swarm, or hiring me if you want to do DSP and a single sub, or hiring us together, we can do a video at your house. If that's something that interests you, let us know. But this is all about finding out what's good for optimal performance. That's the nuance I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just supplementing your mains with a subwoofer and getting good performance or fair performance. This is all about super high level bass performance like you probably never heard before if you don't have these tools and the expertise to integrate them properly. And again, I was in the same boat as everybody else until I got these skills and was able to hear what it is. So make sure you're not just knee-jerk jumping to conclusions based on your primitive experience. If you've got more experience than me, if you've got seen more subs, I've had so many. I've had the Vandersteen sub. Somebody had mentioned about that. You should try the Vandersteen. I've had the Vandersteen. I've tried all kinds of things. I've tried the high level. I even had the T-Series. I've had so much experience. And then I've worked with JR. So if you've got more, that's fine. But, you know, watch this video, watch the last video, and make sure you deal with it on metrics and examples and at least anecdotal stuff. If not, if you can't give actual measurements that show proof that it would apply to a broad range of audience. What I'm trying to show you here is what I'm saying in general, and for 90+%, this is going to be a better way to do things. So without further ado, here's the example. I hope you enjoy. Okay, guys, going to use my MiniDSP SHD. And a lot of people wonder why. I've had $15,000 DACs, $3,000, $4,000, all these different DACs. Why I use the MiniDSP as my DAC? Well, because it has these tools to allow me to integrate my mains with my sub and performs at so much higher delta than any expensive DAC I've ever had when you're using these tools and integrating a sub. So what I'm going to do is, what I just said earlier, is that it's the quality of the tools as well as the expertise that are also part of what I was talking about in the video about the REL. You can't just use an outboard crossover by XYZ company with limited ability yourself or with the crossover itself. Some of these outboard crossovers are all analog. They're very limited in what they can do. You got to plug it into another outlet. It adds hum. They may not be very well designed. Power supplies. All these things I am not a fan of. And so I can understand where people may just go, the heck with it, I'll just use high level. But those should still be better if you have the right people using them. But nothing is better than doing things in the digital domain, in my opinion. Now, JR is able to do a lot of things outside of the digital domain, although you could argue the continuous phase controls, which he uses a lot of in his swarm setup, is basically DSP. But in any case, I like to do everything in the digital domain, from the crossovers and all this, to give you such powerful tools, and I just want to showcase, instead of telling you about it, show you. And I've kind of done this in previous videos with this SHD, but not to this level. So anyway, with the SHD, you have 4 outputs, and you can do your left, right, and 2 subs. Now, I'm not using my SVS anymore, so that's muted. The rel sub is here, and you have EQ settings per the rel, per each channel. You can set EQ per channel, crossover per channel, and then also even timing. So here, I've estimated my timing delay at 1.5 milliseconds for my mains versus my sub that's set further back. Approximately 51 centimeters is the average sound propagation. So you can play with this, and this will impact your results. You can play with crossover, and this will impact your results. And here's one of the things you have with the MiniDSP that you don't have with a lot of subs. Although the SVS does have the high and low pass on board, I find it noisy. So again, it's the quality of the tools that you're using on top of the amount of tools they provide, especially in the digital domain I prefer, and then the expertise. So here, with my Geo Research and Extremes, I'm rolling it off. But let's go ahead and, just for shits and giggles, let's go ahead and turn it off like we're almost doing a high level. And then let's go over here to my rel sub and use, I think they do a Linkwitz-Riley 12 in the, I'm not sure if it's 12. Let's do 24. I'm not sure what the bass slope is with the rel. It's been a while since I looked at that. But I know you don't have all these other options of Butterworth, 18, 6, 12, 48, Linkwitz-Riley, not 48. So let's just split the difference. Let's do 24 Linkwitz-Riley. And let's just, this is almost simulating high-level connection for measurement purposes. So let's go to Dirac. Or let's connect it first. I want to make sure those settings I just chose are locked in. So let's connect. All right, now let's start. Again, I'm going to go fast through this. Dirac is a different tutorial. Maybe I'll do one in the future to refresh what I showed in the past. So bear with me. If you know Dirac, you're going to notice what I'm doing here. Basically, you have to set the mic and calibrate your left and right channel real quick. All right, slight adjustment there, left, right, to balance it for the mic. And then I'm going to choose tightly focused imaging, proceed to measure. And just for this, I'm not going to do all 9 measurements, and just for demonstration purpose, I'm just going to do this main position. So I'm holding the mic right now in this position. I'm going to go ahead and measure it. I'll pause so you don't have to listen to test tone sweeps, and then I'll come back to show you the results. Okay, guys, that measurement, we're going to look at the left channel first with the sub. And man, we have a severe null here. And even here is just a lot of bass missing. And then some peaks here. Now let's take a look at the right channel. Not as severe, but still in that same area. So combined, we would be really bass shy with the Linkwitz-Riley, 24 dB slope, and the Geo Research running full range. Let's go, and don't pay attention to this. We can tell we know our speakers are in phase otherwise, but what we're seeing here, and let's look at the slope again. We picked 60 hertz. So let's do something a little bit different. Let's go ahead and go make a change here. That's something that you can't do with the rel. Let's go Butterworth 48. And what I like about this versus this is I don't like my sub playing much over 100 hertz. But I like the ability of the sub to cover most of the bass frequencies that are going to alleviate my Geo Research and Extremes, but also sealed box at these subs at these frequencies are quite good. I like my mains, let's go to the mains here. I like the GR Research to play in this area of bass because this is where most of the box colorations show up with box speakers. Okay, either resonances or boxy colorations. This is where you get the real bang for your buck with open baffle bass, in my opinion, but not down here. You don't really get box colorations with the omnidirectional frequencies of 20 hertz, and there's just not a lot of colorations, even material down here. So this is where a sealed box, in my opinion, works better. But let's go ahead, and another thing you can't do with the REL, but you can do with the MiniDSP, is implement a filter. So let's go ahead and do 50 hertz of the GR Research. They usually play down to 40 hertz, but let's start it a little bit higher, alleviate them having to do it. But let's not do it of super steep. Let's do it 18 dB. Let's see if having an asymmetrical will cause a phase issue, or maybe it will help address phase issues that are naturally because of positioning in the room, asymmetrical type room. Let's just see what this does. All right, we're going to connect. And also, let's invert the phase of the REL sub, because it looked like the left and right were both out of phase at the higher crossover point. They were down instead of up. So let's go ahead and invert the phase, and this phase button is just basically 0 or 180, the exact same thing that would be on the REL. So let's go ahead and do this. And again, here's a good example of where, in theory, we should get an improvement, but let's just see. You cannot tell. There's no step-by-step. All right, so I'm going to measure just at this one position, and let's see what happens. Okay, so now the left channel looks a lot better. As you can see here, we don't have as big a dips. So inverting the phase and then rolling off the GR Research extremes with those slopes made a nice difference. Let's check the other channel though. Wow. Now this is quite interesting. And again, not predictable from what you would think. All of a sudden now, a huge drop off here with the right channel playing with the sub. So the left channel actually came out better, adding those crossover points and inverting the sub, but not the right channel. So let's just go back real quick. This is part of the troubleshooting that I would do if I was doing this myself. Let's just change this, not inverting anymore, and let's see what happens. Connect. Because this will tell us inverting is either 0 or 180. And what this is telling me, those measurements telling me, is we would need continuous phase controls on the sub to address this problem. Or we're going to need to choose different crossover slopes and points, because that's causing this asymmetrical phase issue. Okay, let's measure it now with the phase non-inverting, just this one position. Stay tuned. Okay, so what we see here is it made the left channel worse when we removed the phase control, but what did we do here? Now the right looks so much better. So here's a perfect example of where continuous phase could probably get this synced a lot better. Now the left and right, at least with this, is performing pretty close. It's just now one channel versus the other That's the problem area. And that's, again, because I have an asymmetrical room. The sub isn't directly in between the two speakers. You can have different room treatments and stuff that could cause these issues. Also, I'm using some asymmetrical slopes. You know, there's a lot of things that are variables here. But what's nice is that somewhat this is manageable by Dirac. You can't boost your way out of these nulls. Let's just see what it says, what would be the corrected. So let's move this here. So it anticipates it can boost enough to get out some of these nulls. Some of these are going to remain. But I don't even like, those again are estimates, not reality. I don't like seeing and making Dirac have to correct all this stuff. I want to get it more perfect before this. So let's try something just to showcase how little things make a big difference. And I bet you if I just change this, let's let the sub play a little bit higher to fill in that blank that we were seeing in both channels now. And so this will play a little bit higher. And the Geo Research, we're going to keep that same slope. It's a Butterworth. But let's just see how that works. Connect. Again, all we did was 10 hertz. Non-inverting. Okay, so just moving 10 hertz. The width of it being down is not that severe, but it has this one small but yet narrow null. This could be mic positioning, just a few inches could change this, but this would not be that audible because it's so narrow and targeted. But let's see how it did the other channel. Wow, much better in this area on the other channel just by going up 10 hertz. So as a group, now these are tracking pretty much the same except for this one narrow area. So this is just to show I wouldn't be finished here. I mean, I would play a little bit more with this to get this right. And then this peak here, you could argue that this is only the sub playing here, so you could lower the volume to bring this down. But this is where a tool like Dirac as a second stage is going to be so much better for evening all of this stuff out. Because you could bring down the volume of the sub and you could argue it's set too high right now. But I prefer it to be high and then let Dirac target where it's going to bring down the volume. Target bringing it down here more than over here. If I bring it all down to make this even, then I brought this below the line. And so it brings up a macro point of volume control is EQ, guys. If you're using a volume control, you're using EQ. But I just prefer it to be a smart volume control where it will bring down what needs to be brought down and keep these high enough. And then same thing, Dirac will fix all of this stuff. And then your corrected should look like this. And then you can even do some curves on your own. And so this is very powerful. Now this is just with one measurement. If I did all 9, this is going to look a lot better and smoother. So again, don't take this as an actual or anything. This is not using Dirac the way it should be used. It's just doing one position. But just to showcase how those settings in the MiniDSP made tangible differences in the measurements that you cannot do with the REL on its own, or even these other subs like SVS. You need to have a tool like this. And even outboard crossovers don't give you all these tools. Now I could stay here all night, change this, change this, change this, and maybe I'll go ahead and run the 9 measurements and show you what it ends up turning out in the end and use this bin. But just wanted to showcase real quick to show you the power of these different tools, what difference makes in an actual measurable fashion. And then obviously this should be very audible, those drastic changes. So I hope you enjoy, guys. Let me go ahead and run the full 9 and I'll show you the results on that. Okay, I knew people were going to ask, so I went ahead and just ran all the Dirac measurements and also did a little bit more tweaking to the settings as if I was doing this my room and optimizing this bin. And this is how the measurements ended up coming out with no major issues, uncorrected left and right. Even left and right are tracking pretty good. And so Dirac is suggesting their curve, a little bit of a Harman curve, 3 dB slope. I don't really worry about this too much because if you recall, in the Bach, you have a 64-bit EQ, and now you're going to have optimal room correction soon. So it will, this is based on estimates of those 9 measurements. Now I'll be even more precise after running this to be what goes into my ear. So I don't worry about this too much. I like it to be pretty much flat, and you can customize this curve. The main thing is I'm not having to add too much if I use this. There's a few little dips here where it would add. You can do this little trick. Let me show you guys. Let's see. Then you take these here, you can basically start at the lowest point of these. Now you have to have enough headroom and gain in your system because it's going to basically lower this. But basically now you're at the point where you're not adding anything based on the measurements. You're not using Dirac and their gain to add any measurements. You're basically, let's do the, everything is going to be down by about 3.5 dB here to 20,000 hertz. You're at 7 dB down. You can make it flat if you want, and that's usually what I do because I can control this even better in the Bach. But showing for people that don't have that, I'm giving you what I would do if I had Dirac alone. This kind of slope is very nice. And when you're not having to add gain, then you don't run into potential digital clipping at those points where Dirac is having to add. Now, Dirac does build in about 12 dB of cushion, so those dips weren't 12 dB by far. So I would have been fine with that, but this is just another way to address that issue if you do have severe dips, and showing you an example. So a little value added perk here. I just wanted to film for you guys, and I'll go ahead and put this into my filter, load it in Bach, and see how it sounds.